Hey guys, happy Chinese New Year. If you don't know, the Chinese New Year is also known as the Lunar New Year or the Spring Festival, depending on who and where are celebrating it. The dates are different each year depending on the lunar or the zodiac calendar, and the celebration lasts many days, also known as the Spring Festival holiday period. So instead of the Christmas break, we have the Chinese New Year's break. I'm not having that in the UK right now, but 2024 is the year of the dragon. So I think it's really cool, and I'm really happy today. It's Chinese New Year's Eve, and I got a lot of red packets, so money for my family. So I would be talking about crime trends and murder cases during this period, and it might seem very terrible of me to do because why are you talking about murders and deaths during Chinese New Year? But one, I do want people to be aware of the dangers and be careful even during the holiday period. And two, crimes are always going to exist, doesn't matter how much you try to avoid them, and being ignorant is not the way. 2022, the year of the mouse, there were 3 very famous cases. I'm pretty sure there are other ones, but you can already see how things are starting to go wrong. In 2023, last year, the year of the rabbit, there were 10 famous cases alongside the others that are going on, and you could really see how things are going just a bit too crazy. The trend is that there are often mass murders and manslaughters happening in rural and suburban areas, and they reflect a lot of critical issues, which I will discuss very soon. The first one I will analyze is the Pingyang mass murder case, which is also called the Wrath of the Commoners, and you might see why very soon. It took place in January 19th within the Spring Festival holiday period, just maybe 3 days before the Chinese New Year. It took place in Pingyang, Zhejiang Province, the province where I came from in China. The perpetrator's name is Yang. He was 42 years old at the time. He stabbed 6 people to death and continued to run over their bodies with his car repeatedly. He slaughtered the entire family except a young girl who witnessed the entire incident at the time. And he was, fortunately, caught on his way to murder the 7th. To give some context, the victims were local authorities in Yang's village. They took Yang's land, and when he confronted them, they used their powers, framed him, and sent him to a jail/psych ward for 3 years. When he was in jail, Yang's dad was abused by other local residents to please the local authorities, and when he knew about the lost land, he died very shortly after the shock. When Yang came back from jail, he first divorced his wife, and only after he committed the murder. So you could see how it was a planned murder out of revenge. And here in the image you can see the circle bar is where the land was. Afterwards, Yang's family were only compensated with 500 Chinese yuan instead of the 6,000 Chinese yuan that they should have received. They reported to other authorities, but their complaint was not met with any solutions. The case had a lot of controversies because some people thought it just such a small piece of land, while others said that it definitely reflected a lot more issues than just the land dispute. It was called the Wrath of the Commoners because crime rates were really high at the time. There was a lot of corruption issues, and the case caused a lot of public outrage. Second one, California mass shooting case. It was January 21st, Chinese New Year's Eve last year, after an all-day Lunar New Year festival happening in Monterey Park, California, US. The perpetrator's name is Hu Kan-chuan. He was 72 years old at the time, and he was either Chinese or Vietnamese, depending on different news sources. He shot 11 people to death, injured 9 others at Stall Ballroom Dance Studio, and he was caught after he drove north to the Lai Lai Ballroom to continue his shooting spree. He was disarmed by staff and fled by car. The next day, when the police approached him, it was found that he died from the self-inflicted gunshot wound in his car. He died the day after the incident, the day of the Chinese New Year. And obviously, the police were like, we're not clear on the motive. Did he have a mental illness? Was he a domestic violence abuser? Evidence gathered said that it was more of personal motives rather than terrorism or hate crime. His old acquaintances said that he used to be a dance instructor at both dance studios, and he used to go to the studios every night during late 2000s and early 2010s. His wife said that he was not a domestic abuser, but he was very quick to anger, and other people at the studio said that he had very bad temperament, a little bit psycho in a sense, and that his personality could be characterized by two words: distrust, he wouldn't trust anybody, and hatred, he would hate people to the extreme. To give some other context, such as why this took place in the Chinese New Year, about 65% of residents in Monterey Park are of Asian descent, many of whom do not speak English. And California has the largest Asian American population in the US. As of 2020, 15.5% of the state's population are Asian Americans, and partial Asians were 17% even. That's why some scholars described as an ethnic enclave in the suburbs that thrives because it refuses to assimilate, instead unapologetically catering to its own immigrant community, which I think is a very offensive statement because gun violence is not a part of East Asian culture because of strict gun control in East Asian countries. In a way, Yang assimilated perfectly by committing mass shooting in the US. Assimilation doesn't necessarily mean less crime rates. At 72 years of age, Trump became the second oldest mass killer in the US. And I know when I say second, some people are going to ask about the first. The first one was only 1 year older, 73 years old. It is the deadliest mass shooting in the history of LA County. US President, Mayor, and Governor all expressed their condolences. The second day of Monterey Park's Lunar New Year festival was cancelled, and security stepped up in other cities celebrating the New Year. It was really a tragic case because many mistook the gunshots as New Year fireworks, but in reality, many lives were lost. I would like to discuss the criminological theories in here as well. I think one of them is definitely psychological. In the first case, Yang stayed in a psych ward for 3 years, which could have really affected his mental state and mentality. While in the second one, from anecdotal evidence, Tran did seem to have some mental issues, perhaps with personality as well. In criminology, psychological positivism studies theories that focus on the personality and psychological makeup and learning process of individuals and how these have been thought to relate to crime and antisocial behavior. And we should definitely look at socioeconomic factors as well. From the Chicago School Studies, the zonal hypothesis was definitely one of them, where a city has its different parts, different zones, have their own culture and way of life. In rural and suburban areas, there could be less law enforcement, and poverty also leads to low delinquency rates, which affect criminal behavior. And if there are more crimes in an area, cultural transmission will make the youth and children in that area learn to commit crime, being regarded as the culture of the area. Crime and delinquency rates tended consistently to be lower in areas of high socioeconomic status and higher in areas of relative socioeconomic deprivation. Another is the labeling theory. The labeling theory indicates that society's assigning of labels to individuals or certain groups can have an effect on their behavior. In criminology, labeling someone as a criminal can lead to bad conduct, and this is where racism comes into play as well. In the first one, Yang was framed and obviously labeled as a criminal, but in the second one, in foreign countries, Asians are often seen as devious and potentially illegal immigrants. They have a much higher risk of being stopped, searched, and arrested by the police than white people. In 2021, there was also an epidemic of hate in California. Anti-Asian hate crimes in California jumped 177% that year. And those labels could have affected criminal behavior. The process of making the criminal is a process of tagging, defining, identifying, segregating, describing, emphasizing, making conscious and self-conscious. It becomes a way of simulating, suggesting, emphasizing, and evoking the very traits that are complained of. The person becomes the thing he is described as being. The way out is through a refusal to dramatize the evil. Some other things about the context is that during Chinese New Year, there's a lot more gatherings, so it seemed like the criminals intended to commit mass murder and manslaughter, so Chinese New Year gatherings would be the perfect occasion. Another thing it does is that it attracts attention and definitely a lot of news coverage. Another very important aspect of these cases are murder-suicides. In the first case, first-degree planned murders in China would often face death sentence. So when Yang committed the crimes, he had no mercy and he knew the consequences would come. In a way, it was also a suicide. In the second one, Tran committed suicide after the crime, so it seemed that they had a very clear idea of what they want to do before they die. And I think perhaps partial of these have to do with individual conflicts, but they definitely reflect wider issues in the society that should be focused on a little bit more. Corruption, governmental issues, and racism are definitely things to look at and improve on, rather than just a tough on crime stance, which has been proven to be ineffective, because it is truly tragic in Chinese New Year and definitely all the other festivals where families should be happy gathering together.